Everybody down!
Welcome back to the ZERT Coffee and Chaos Podcast, the show where we talk about anything and everything relating to what it means to be a survivalist and a prepared individual in today's society. I'm your host, Chris Bartigone, ZP002. Back with me on the show today, my co-host, Jamie Franks. And as always, Jamie, welcome for being on the show today. Glad to have you.
Yeah, glad to be here. And I don't know how I sound, but I think maybe both of us sound less
better,
crappy and stuffy than last time. But
yes, I agree. I am fully over it.
I'm not fully there. I still have every morning when I wake up, I've got the 10-minute ritual of coughing up crap. And
I'm gonna say there's one lingering piece, and that's why I screwed up that entire intro and said welcome for being here. I mean, Jesus, this is only my second or third cup of coffee. My God, what's the matter with me today? Horrible. I'm telling you. Anyway, I'm glad that you are on the mend, but sorry that you are not fully back to 100%.
Yeah, I'm in that weird zone where like I feel fine. I don't feel sick. I don't feel like I need to go lay down, but there's just still stuff coming out. So, you know.
Yeah, that's not good. Well, I'm still blowing my nose to this day. I mean, even downstairs, I was doing some video editing and research for today's show, and I'm just sitting there. I'm like, why is this stuff continuing to pour out of my nostrils here? It's rather annoying. But whatever. It's the winter. We're on the tail end of it. This Sunday, as today's recording. And what's interesting is we're recording today, Wednesday. What is today? The 5th. Yep. Sunday is the 9th, which is daylight savings. For some reason, it seems like that's earlier this year. I don't know why that seems really early to me.
I agree. Yeah, I do.
Yeah. I'm sure it's Trump's fault. I'm sure.
Well,
it's probably.
I went to I made everybody in my office laugh yesterday because I was drinking one of my cans of sparkling water, and I went and threw the can away, and I missed, and it landed on the floor, and I was like, Trump, damn it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but, and obviously last night was his first joint address, which I'm not sure why we're not calling it a State of the Union, but he was on there.
Because the State of the Union is a recap of the last year, and he's not been in office a year, so it is customary or traditional that a president, a newly elected president, doesn't do a State of the Union their first year because it hasn't been a year. So
I don't even want to open that can of worms because you and I spoke on the phone yesterday for 2.5 hours, just talking about things. Not even, we were preparing for today, but I do not want to open that can of worms because we will just be here all day. But
I mean, you and I could talk for 2.5 hours about shoe leather or so. I don't but
you're not wrong.
Honestly, I don't really think there's that much to say about the address last night. This first thing this morning, I saw a poll from CNN of all places. And so, if this is coming from CNN, this says a lot. But according to the CNN poll, it said that 69% of people that viewed the address last night agreed with it and viewed it favorably. So if that's coming from CNN, then that's
interesting. Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, I vowed to kind of stay off the social media internet today. I had stuff that I had to do, and I was not going to get bogged down. and I just happened to scroll right before setting all of this up, and I made the mistake of commenting on a buddy of mine's post because he asked the question, and the question is, and like I said, I do not want to go too far down the rabbit hole, or we'll never get to our topic today. But
Yeah.
and you know what? Before I go into that, I want to just first start by saying, obviously, thank you to all the listeners out there. Thank you guys for joining us today on today's show. Where I was going, the initial point is today's show is actually going to air tomorrow because of the topic of today and the fact that it was only not even a week ago for the anniversary of what we're going to be talking about. So thank you guys for listening. I know that there has been some technical issues with Apple. If you are consuming this podcast over on Apple Podcast, there were 2 weeks of shows that were missing. The server that we were posting to, we outgrew that server, and that is all of the shows that are on the Firearms Radio Network. That has since been updated, and so now we should have no issues going forward. So if you did miss the last 2 weeks of shows because you listened to Apple, they are up there, so go over and check those out. And that should be a 4-wheel drive one and a networking one as well. So thank you for listening and for being here.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. So the post was literally about, and the guy was asking a question like, what is it that was so horrible about a 13-year-old with brain cancer who wanted to be a police officer that you couldn't even clap and stand for that?
Yeah.
And the person's post in rebuttal to that question was, oh, you're drinking the Kool-Aid. He is, Zelensky, and you're the same person that says Zelensky started the war and he's violating the Constitution. And my response was, leave it up to you to respond to the question with something that does not pertain to the actual question. I said, what does drinking Kool-Aid have to do with not standing and acknowledging a 13-year-old with brain cancer? What is so bad about that? He had nothing to do with Trump. All Trump did was make this kid's wish come true.
Yeah, recognize him and
make him. What is so evil about that? I said, wait, let me guess. You're going to respond with something that has nothing to do with the question that I just asked. It is literally it was the handbook. It's the playbook for left woke liberals. Ask the direct question. Can't provide an actual answer that makes sense. Deflect to something else and call you a racist. Like, that's what they do. And it's so painful. It's so painful to watch. But what was beautiful to watch was the hour and a half of their sourpuss, we're a sore loser face that is only going to guarantee another 8 years of Republican presidency after this. You look like complete trash.
But yeah, and one of my other friends said something similar this morning. He said, based on the outcome of that address last night and the favorability that it's seems to have today, just across the entire spectrum. Like he said, based on this, he predicts that during the midterm elections that Democrats won't pick up they won't have a single pickup.
No,
I think that's a bold prediction because I think, Americans kind of famously or infamously have a really short memory when it comes to political things, and especially those on the left, like all those people you're talking about last night that were in the room. People like that seem to have a really broad blind spot where they choose not to see things and they choose not to acknowledge things. And we talked, is one of the things you and I talked about yesterday was people have lost the ability or the willingness or whatever to be objectively intellectually honest. And there is no more perfect example. Like the president of the United States is recognizing this kid that has a tragic terminal illness and is bringing awareness to that subject, awareness to that, cause, and just doing something nice for a little kid. And people have to, because they're programmed or whatever, they have to, even something that I think there's no other way to paint that other than objectively good, and people have to poo-poo on it, anyway.
Like, how do you not stand up and immediately start clapping or get a little bit, a little bit tight? And I mean, you get a little bit weepy. Like, the Secret Service dude comes down, hands him the badge. The guy picks him up, and this kid turns and he hugs he hugs that man. And you just see the look on his face, the Secret Service guy's face. It's just like the most, I don't know. It was just the most endearing act right there, and I thought that was beautiful. The way that they did it, and the way that kid did it. And I saw a little interview with him today. I think I saved it. Like, hearing the kid talk is awesome because he's from Texas, right? So he's got that little Southern draw, and his outlook on what is happening right now, like in his life, like he's like, I was given 5 months. He's like, I'm going to keep riding this thing until it bucks me. Like, holy shit, man. Like, that just breaks my heart. But
I'm a big fan and avid listener of Adam Carolla, and like one of the things he always says, like he always describes Democrats as like when you're pulling tug of war with a dog, it's not that you're trying to go north and the dog is trying to go south, and so you're pulling against each other. The dog, you can spin around to the other side of the dog, and the dog is just still going to keep trying to pull against you. The dog is not trying to go a direction; they're just trying to go against you, and I think that's where we're at in our modern political climate, and it's a shame.
Yeah, it is. It is a shame. But
your entire platform is just to pull opposite of me, no matter what.
But we try and stay out of the politics on this show, guys, because it is a touchy subject, right? Like, and so we don't go down there. Obviously, you can probably deduce from some of the things that I've said, my standpoint, my political standpoint, which side I'm on. I'm sure you probably have thought the same of Jamie, and that's fine. And one of the reasons that he and I were on the phone yesterday for 2.5 hours, I was telling you this, I was like, I enjoy consuming knowledge and having intellectual conversations, like running out there and yelling at people, calling them libtards or this, that, the other thing. It's like, you're not going to get anywhere. And I love that stuff, right? I mean, too often I don't work in an office. I don't get to interact with coworkers around the water cooler. Mine is to have conversations like this with you and with my other friends, and to talk about stuff like this. And whether you want to jump into it or not, unfortunately, it's in our face, right? Like, we can talk. Hey, you want to talk about the new Daredevil series that just came out from Marvel today? Sure, I'll talk about that all day long too, because shit, man, it was awesome. Well, it came out last night. And it was awesome. I can talk guns, I can talk movies, I can talk all of that stuff. I'm sure you and I can talk about the movie Heat, which is going to be a little bit about what we're talking about today. And I didn't realize that, obviously, when that movie came out. But last week, February 27th, what is that? No, I got 27th.
Okay.
Double check that. Yep. February 27th. Okay.
1997.
Okay. Maybe I am probably wrong. But I made sure to do this stuff. But anyway, almost 18 years ago. 18 years ago, right?
Nope. 28 years ago.
I'm sorry, Jesus, my God. I'm sitting here. I'm going back to this. Yep, you're right. Totally wrong. We're going to start that over. Just kidding. Not really. This is called Blooper Reel. Boom. February 28th, 1997. So a lot of years ago.
And like the only reason why that, like, I'm not trying to like shit on your point. It's just like one of the points I was going to make at some point was I find it fascinating, like how there's the generic moniker that, like, history repeats itself, but I do find it interesting that like certain things do kind of seem to reoccur, like and the thing we're going to talk about, February 28th, the siege at Waco also began on February 28th, and
not 1997 though.
No,
right?
not 1997. Yeah. No. But it just like, what is it about this time of year? I think the Oklahoma City bombing was in March or April, so it's like this time of year. And I've talked to my people at work about how many wars have started on a Sunday. It's
Yeah, it's weird. And I guess we'll look into that, look into what happened. But so anyway, February 28th, 1997, 28 years ago at around just after 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, two individuals decided that it was time to rob a bank, Bank of America. The now famous or infamous, however you want to look at it, North Hollywood shootout took place. And it was pre-cell phone days, which is wild, right? So
that's true.
We saw this incident unfold on the news, much like we did watch, much like we watched OJ, running from the cops. Like, this was all on the news. People were glued to the TV, watching a couple of videos to kind of refresh what happened. You're listening to a reporter, like, he didn't know what was happening. Like, all of a sudden he gets a call from the desk sergeant saying, here's what we got going on. And everyone's jumping in their vehicles. And now you're driving there. There was no cell phone footage of the incident being captured when it went down.
But so this was, this was post OJ though by a couple of years, which I think, insofar as like giving us, there actually is quite a bit of footage that you can watch.
Oh yeah.
And so I think because of the success and the ratings that the OJ, the chase, the pursuit that was at like 40 miles an hour, but
right.
The OJ chase, all the sensationalism and all the ratings and stuff that came out of that, I think that's why we got such good footage of this.
Oh yeah.
Just because what OJ was 94, this was 97.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and we're going to dive into a little bit about the entire incident. Now, mind you, this incident took place it happened for 44 minutes. 44-minute shootout where over 1,100 rounds were shot. I have since forgotten about it.
By some estimates, like as many as 2,000. So but yeah.
Yes. Like most people, I would assume the highlight of the entire situation was the shootout, right?
Yeah.
Like, what I found interesting today when I kind of recapped is that this was their third bank attempt. Not their third robbery, but their third bank attempt. They had a couple of armored cars, and then
they're suspected in the armored cars when they think it was them. They don't really know. And then they did two other banks prior to this one.
They did two other banks in 1996 and walked away with $1.5 million. Holy shit, you morons! Like, walk away. I mean, he's just like, walk away, you idiots. Like, if this was like a fiction movie and and Michael Bay decided to do this, like, they would walk away, or one of them would get away and he would go live on a tropical island. He'd be the anti-hero. But I found it interesting about that. There wasn't many images I saw of the two. Like, there's the two famous kind of mugshot pictures, but we'll get into some of that, but that's where we're going to start before we get into the actual February 28th, 1997 incident, not the 27th.
I do think it's interesting, for whatever reason, it's like every few years, certain things like Black Hawk Down seem to kind of get a renewed like surge of interest, and like some new movie will come out, or a new documentary will come out, or a new one of the Black Hawk Down veterans will do a podcast and it'll gain a bunch of traction. And so it's weird, like, to me, like the North Hollywood shootout, like, I remember very vividly like watching it on the day, and it's something I've been very intrigued by ever since, because there as I'm sure we'll get into a lot of it, there's a lot of like really interesting things that came before, during, and after it, but it seems like most people have like almost forgotten about it, or I mean, I don't know, maybe in 2025 maybe there's a good number of people that don't even know about it. I don't know.
I mean, it could, it wasn't, obviously you're not going to get some youngin just out of high school who remembers something like this, right? It's not like it's
I was a youngin' right out of high school when this
well,
happened.
yeah, no, I get that. I'm talking some younging that's just that youngin' right out of high school right now.
Oh, sorry.
Understand
Yeah,
it.
got
Yeah.
it.
But
Everything's about me. What do you mean?
right.
Yeah,
Going
sorry.
back, what's interesting is they were first arrested in 1993.
Mhm.
And when you listen to the story of how they were arrested, they were literally in like a red Ford Thunderbird. They exited a gas station parking lot at a high rate of speed. Police officer took note, stopped them, approached the vehicle in a traffic stop, didn't like the vibe he was catching, got him out of the vehicle, searched the trunk to find a full on arsenal.
Yep.
AKs, fully automatic weapons, body armor, the whole deal. They were arrested. They were arrested like with suspected of robbing or attempting to rob a bank. Literally, that's what they were caught for.
Yeah.
They did 100 days in jail.
So I'm friends with one of he's a former LAPD detective. He's a former LAPD. I have one of the patches. I should go dig it out, not right now, but LAPD had like a tactical narcotics team. And he was part of that. He was a detective, and he was there on the day of the Hollywood shootout. He was in the fight that day.
Wow.
And he told me this isn't anywhere like the reference material that I looked up this morning. It's not explicitly spelled out in that, but he told me that they were arrested on this traffic stop, and they had illegal guns. They had guns that had been illegally converted to full auto. They had pipe bombs. They had ammunition. They had body armor. They had police radios with the police radio frequencies like dialed into them, like all this stuff. And because they were stopped for speeding, there was something about their lawyer proved that there was not probable cause for the search, and that the search was done improperly, and so that's why they only served 100 days in jail. And when they were released from jail, the cops had to give everything back, even these illegal weapons and all. The only thing they didn't give back was like the pipe bombs, I think. But he said that that their lawyer proved that like the search had been done illegally or without proper cause or whatever. And so so they served 3 months in jail and then got all their stuff back.
All their shit back. Like unfucking believable. Like, could you imagine like that lawyer? Now, what I will say is the only two people killed during the North Hollywood shootout were the two suspects. Okay. Which is amazing because the amount of shots that were shot, there were people that were injured. Okay, got it. But there was no loss of life other than the two idiots that pulled this thing off. Now, you look at that, right? If that was different and there were 60 people killed during this 44-minute shootout, I mean, you go back to that attorney that got them off, it's just like, oh God. But anyway, so moving forward a couple of years, 1995, there was an armored truck that was robbed where the driver was killed. And there was like $122,000 that was taken during that. Now you're telling me that it's alleged that they were the suspects in that?
Yes, so they are the suspects, but it was never like proven that was them, because it matched they were so the and I don't think they found out that these guys were the bank robbers of the other two banks until after this incident was already over, because the police, obviously they had a case built, they had a case going, they had an investigation going, and the name of these two suspects, they were calling them the high incident robbers, but they didn't know who they were. And so I think after the shootout, they positively tied those other bank robberies to these two individuals, but they think, based on the MO, the modus operandi, that this was also them for the armored cars, but it's never been like hard proven.
Now, folks, if you are listening to this on Spotify or Apple, you're unfortunately not going to get the same experience as you're going to be watching this, because we are going to include clips of the gunfire and the quote unquote tactics that they were using, and we're going to put that in, and we're just going to be talking about it as we kind of get to it. So if you are interested in seeing some of that stuff, then you can head over to the YouTube channel, the ZERT Coffee and Chaos YouTube channel, where we will play this video portion of the podcast. So the first attempt in 1995 was a alleged attempt by these two. The second one was in 1996. And it was a failed attempt in 96 for an armored van. And then it was a month later that the bank was robbed, and they were all, I think they were all Bank of Americas.
Yeah, I believe that's correct.
In 1996, there was a bank robbed where they got $755,000, and then again in 96, they got $794,000. And then obviously the third was in 1997, where they were expecting to get the same and only walked out of the bank with $303,000,
yep.
All of which was destroyed due to, I believe, like a die pack, or there was something that happened, but the money was exploded. Or
they were expecting to get like $750,000. They're like the money delivery was delayed or for some reason, and so there only ended up being like $300K in the vault, which they took. And I think in the $300K, I think I read that there were 3 die packs in it, and so most of the money would have been unusable anyway, due to the die packs. But like these guys definitely, I think they fall under the header of crazy. I mean, they were on drugs. That was shown in the
they did. Yeah, they did take drugs.
But they did good recon. The reason why all the banks that they robbed were Bank of America is because I don't know how they figured this out, but they figured out that the whatever type of bank vault was in use in the Bank of America, it was bulletproof, but only up to like small caliber rounds or low power rounds or something like that. But they figured out, because in all these bank robbery movies, it's always like, who's the manager that has the combo? Get over here, and I'm going to blow your brains out if you don't enter the combo.
Right.
But I guess with these Bank of America bank vaults that they were in use at that time, they figured out that the bulletproof rating or whatever couldn't stand up to heavy caliber weapons, and so that's why they used heavy rifle calibers so that they could just shoot the vault doors open. So
got it. Okay. So
they did good recon and had good info, and
they did. So that is the I guess the timeline, right? So from 93 to 97 was their timeline of bank robberies or armed car robberies. So now, looking at this in 1997 and looking at the actual incident, one of the things that obviously they said is that they had timers, and it was 8 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the things that kind of confused the police officers, because it was like 8 minutes. Like, where are they? It seems like an eternity to be in the bank, where, you'd think that they would not want to be in that long, but obviously they had police scanners, and that maybe they knew what their response time was to situations like this.
Yeah. So they, again, going back to the recon piece, they did say they had police scanners, and they had been monitoring the police scanners for several weeks and determining the average response time to like robberies just in general. And they determined that the average response time was 7 minutes. So they set their watches for 8 minutes to, that they needed to be out of there by 8 minutes hard, but they determined that the average response time was 7 minutes, supposedly, is what I heard.
Right. Now, here's the thing, right? That is a little confusing. Do you remember the opening scene of Ocean's 11 with George Clooney when he robs the bank?
I do not. I've not seen that movie in a long time.
I mean, he walks in a suit, walks up to the teller, hands the teller a note, and says, you see that person, and he just happened to look over, and there was a guy sitting with the bank manager, and he said, you see that guy with his briefcase open, you see that guy, that's my partner, and if you don't do what I say and I don't give him a signal, he is going to do whatever. And the lady fills the money, fills the thing with money, and as he walks away, he walks over to the guy sitting there, who is a stranger, and says, hey, what do you think of that girl over there? And she looks over, and he nods, and that was it. And then he walks out of the bank. And, in the movie, he's caught because the car doesn't start. These two guys walk into a bank. And what's funny is I just watched The Town, right? And there's a scene in The Town where the FBI is talking to Ben Affleck, and he's like, you guys didn't just decide to do this. You decided to bang it out at 9 a.m. in the middle and that's what these guys were dressed for. In every one of these robberies, they were they were assuming that a fight was coming, right? These guys, and like you just said, like, they probably, when they tipped that scale of crazy, they were over the line of crazy. They had disdain towards the police, and apparently at some point they just hated things.
Yeah, but referencing movies, this is talked about in Point Break and in Heat. Bodhi talks about it in Point Break, and right when they're making Special Agent Utah go into the bank with them, Bodhi talks about this, and then De Niro's character in Heat talks about this. Like there is an advantage to be gained from projecting like overwhelming force. That like if you go in there dressed like Danny Ocean with a snub nose 38 or with nothing, with a letter written down that says my buddy over there has a briefcase with something in it, you're not projecting overwhelming force, and maybe that can make somebody decide to try to test you or whatever. And but when you go in there rolling heavy like these dudes, no, like you immediately neutralize like people, like nobody's gonna decide to test. So it's it ends up, in hindsight, it ends up not working out for them because their little 8-minute time limit went out the window. But it did give them 44 minutes.
Well,
yes and no. Their firepower gave them 44 minutes, but
and body armor.
But like in Heat, that same thing. They all went in wearing suits with all their with their vests and tactical gear and stuff like underneath their suits, so they were at least trying to be incognito. So you're right about that. These dudes were not trying to go in low key, but they were trying to project overwhelming power. But their average 7-minute response time and their 8-minute timer all went out the window because just completely by chance, when they were entering the bank, a patrol car saw them.
Exactly. And so these dudes went in unsuspecting of what was happening outside.
Yeah.
Like they went in to perform the robbery. But here's the thing, right? They went in and just started opening fire. Like you heard that initial call in dispatch going, shots fired, shots fired. Like these dudes went in and went all kind of Hollywood style and just started pulling that trigger into the ceiling.
But this was their third robbery, and that's exactly what they had done in the other one. So they did have a template that seemed to be working for them. Shooting their weapons in the air to get again to project that overwhelming force, and then to shoot the vault door open, which they knew they could do. So
So they were in the bank, and like you had said, and they're just kind of, one guy is walking around maintaining security, while one guy gets the bank manager and gets him into the vault. Like you did say, they had taken drugs. They had taken drugs to what was it, to kind of lower it wasn't like it was to like mellow them out.
Yes, basically. They weren't on cocaine or anything. They were on phenobarb, which is a depressant. Yeah.
So at one point, one of the guys walks past the front door to notice something odd, right? Like there was no traffic in front. So at this point, the police had everybody set up, and you can see like police cars have blocked off the street. The dude walks out of the street, looks at a police car, but doesn't like that was one of the things that was really weird. Like he doesn't immediately overreact, if you
Yeah.
will. He doesn't turn and start firing. He just turns around, walks back into the bank. And then the two of them exit and start opening fire.
Right.
And you can see it. Like you can see the one guy, like he is just very calmly like throwing rounds at these police cars, like just ripping rounds. Now, one of the things that they said is they were using armor piercing ammo. I don't know. Was that confirmed? I don't.
Well,
I mean,
and whose definition of armor piercing ammo? Because
right.
it depending on your armor and depending on my ammo may be armor piercing ammo without being quote unquote armored, that I purchased armor piercing ammo. I mean, like
right.
caliber, like, you know, one of the guns they had was an AR-15 with a beta mag. And I mean, if they were, and this was 1997, so green tip ammo would have been widely available, and some people do refer to green tip ammo as armor piercing, even though it's like it technically kind of is, but it's like technically not. Like it's armor piercing just because of the weight of the round and the muzzle velocity, and it does have that little steel penetrator inside of it. But I mean, it's not designed to defeat like body armor, really. I mean, I don't know, but
yeah,
so
it's plates.
Yeah, it's so I mean, I guess that's a colloquial term, and
right. They're literally showing like they're like, oh, and you can see it in the footage where they're showing you, oh, these bullets were ripping through police cars, and you see the cops all ducking behind their vehicles as cover. And as you know, and as we talk about, and people and trainers talk about, like cars are not cover; they're bullet magnets, and they tell you to get away from the vehicle as long as you as quickly as can. Now,
yes, that's what good trainers say.
Right, but what Chili and Chili Palmer will tell you is it's better than air, right? I mean, you know, if you've got the choice of being behind nothing or that, what would you choose, right? So I get it, but you know, when you look at those vehicles, I mean, they're shredded. Like there's bullet holes all, and again, when you look at the footage, you see holes going in. The media will do what the media always does and show you that it's, oh yeah, look at these bullets, they went in. Okay, did they come out the other side? Right? Like that's great if they went into the one door on the passenger side. Did they go all the way through the other door on the driver's side and into somebody? Obviously, there were police officers that were getting injured. So there were shots that were being made either through glass or when they were not behind cover. You know, when you look at some of this footage that you see here, like these police officers are just running in the street, like they are moving from cover to cover and they are exposed. Go ahead.
Also, no, this exposes lots of stuff like that, you know, this there's a lot to unpack just in what you've talked about so far. So this is something I've talked about ever since the Boston Marathon bombing, is that two very young men who did not really know what they were doing brought the entire city of Boston to its knees.
Yep, sure did.
And like here you have two guys that are against like how many police officers?
I thought they said there was hundreds. I want to say 400 is what they said.
So you've got two dudes that are against a numerically superior force, but two well-prepared guys with a plan were able to fend off, let's just say 100.
Wait, now I want to challenge you right there for 1 second. Okay. Do you think that they had a plan, which I agree with. I think that they had a plan, but do you think that this was part of it?
No, I think they had a rough escape plan, but they had worked together and they were familiar with each other, and I think they had the framework of a plan in what to do in a situation like this. And I also kind of think like though they talk about this in Heat also, like there in a lot of criminals there is this is when De Niro and Pacino are sitting down in the famous scene in the coffee shop. Like he talks about like there are some crews that like in the back of their mind they wants to get caught.
Right.
And like with these guys, when you look at what they had done previous, when you look at the way they were geared up, when you look at all the signs, I think part of them was hoping that this fight would eventually come. I think in their minds they had this romantic notion of having a big shootout with the cops.
Right.
And whether or not that's completely true, they were at least objectively prepared for it. You don't, because they had I think it did say like, overall, but between them and the cops around 2,000 rounds were fired. But I think they had 3,100 rounds of ammunition on them.
So just to give some details, there were over 300 police officers from multiple different jurisdictions. Okay. There were 2,000 shots that were fired, upwards 2,650 from the police officers. The rest were from the two gunmen. So just a quick little fact check right there on just pulling some of that information.
So I'm seeing they had it like in the vehicle, they had 1,600 rounds of 7.62 by 39, 1,200 rounds of 9mm and 45 handgun ammunition, and it says several hundred rounds of 5.56. So
what they had an HK91, which is, I thought that's a 308, right?
No, it's a 5.56 gun.
It is a 5.56.
Yeah. Okay. The HK93 is a 308.
There we go. All right. Okay.
But so I mean, so they were tipping the scales at 3,000 rounds of ammunition they had on them. Yeah. So I mean, again, you don't roll in heavy with 3,000 rounds of ammunition if you don't have this scenario kind of in the back, rattling around in the back of your mind somewhere.
Very true.
But this is where I'm going. Like, the question is, did the police have a plan? And the answer is no. And this is something I talk about in my training, and I know Paul does too. If me and you go out together and I have a gun and you have a gun, if you and I haven't trained together, we're just two individuals with guns. And that's what I read from this situation is these two dudes had a little bit, maybe they didn't train together, but this was their third bank robbery on top of possibly a couple of armored car robberies. So these two guys at least had a battle rhythm and a familiarity with each other, but it seems like all these hundreds of cops showing up, it was just 100 dudes that had guns that really weren't working effectively as a team. These guys are laying.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead. Finish that.
So they, initial contact, these guys were laying down suppressing fire. They had, we hadn't talked about this yet. They were wearing level 3A body armor, which also speaks to their recon, because at that time,
all right, well, then let me jump in there and let me back up to what you just said about the firearm. So they rolled in heavy with rifles and one pistol. I know you said 45, but I think the only thing I saw were the rifles, the AK, the HK91, I think an AR style, and then a Beretta 92. I didn't see anything 45.
But those are the firearms that were used. So the fact that the thing I saw said that they had 45 ACP ammo, like maybe the one guy had a pistol and never used it.
Yeah.
Because you just listed off all the firearms that were actually used. And fired.
Now, what's interesting, and before we get into what you were just about to talk about with body armor, the only thing the police rolled up with were their pistols and shotguns. They had no rifles. There were no rifles. And
that's correct. You just the way you just phrased that is correct. There were none. The LAPD did not have rifles at that time.
Right. So. And their solution to the rifles needed at the time was they ran away from the scene to a gun store to grab rifles off the shelf.
Yes.
So then you're grabbing rifles.
Story.
Yeah. And you're smashing magazines, you're loading mags to then go get back in the fight. Like, horrible. SWAT was SWAT was, I don't know, 18 minutes away at doing training.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, doing
So,
PT. Yep.
yeah. So we'll get into that. But where I want to go with, and just real quick, this is one of those things that we've talked about, and you and I kind of differ in thinking, right? Like, you always tell me that the only thing the pistol is good for is to fight to the rifle.
Yeah.
And this is one of those situations where your statement is an accurate statement. These guys had pistols versus rifles. Now, mind you, even their rifles were not doing any damage to end lives, right? Like, they were not trained with their rifles.
You talking about the police?
No, I'm talking about the two suspects. They had rifles.
Oh,
and like, there was some form of cohesion, but not a lot of actual training, because if they were trained peoples with the rifles, that fight would have been over maybe a lot less, except for the fact that maybe sheer force, 400 versus 2, it doesn't matter. You at some point you may lose that battle, right? This isn't the movies.
As the Marines say, accuracy by volume.
Yeah. But so now you understand that it's pistol versus rifle, 400 pistols versus 2 rifles. You throw some shotguns in there, and they're still not able to overwhelm the 2 suspects. And then now we talk about armor, right?
Well, at that time in 1997, the LAPD's weapons arsenal was 92 F Berettas, 92 FS Berettas, both 9mm pistols, Smith & Wesson Model 15, 38 special revolvers, and 12 gauge Ithaca Model 37 pump shotguns. Those were the standard issue firearms of the entire LAPD at that time, with the exception of SWAT, who had MP5s. So when the first SWAT officer showed up, cool, they brought MP5s, which look really great on TV, but it's still just a 9mm. And so that's the famous story of the police officers running on foot to the gun store and just commandeering rifles off the shelf. And the article I read said they got 5 AR-15s off the shelf at the gun store, but my friend Vince that was there, he told me that the SWAT guys got like deer hunting rifles as well. Like that,
I saw that.
They got a couple of bolt guns too, but
which, hey, listen, I'm not, a qualified SWAT sniper positioned anywhere outside of that zone could have stopped this a lot faster than just firing 9mm shots at dudes wearing level 3 armor. I mean, they weren't wearing ballistic helmets. They were not wearing anything, they obviously, there's nothing covering their legs. They were using cover. They used the car.
You're talking about the robbers?
The 2 robbers.
Their legs were covered in armor. They had level 3A vests wrapped around their legs and arms.
Well, the one guy got shot in the legs, and that's what the last guy that got killed, when SWAT showed up, they shot him in the legs to stop the fight.
They shot him underneath the car, and they shot up his feet.
Oh,
they basically shot up his feet and ankles with one of the AR-15s from underneath. They laid down underneath the car, and they shot him.
Because they said he died by blood loss.
So they shredded his feet and ankles. But
Oh, okay. Regardless,
spoiler alert.
Well, yeah, sorry. Yeah. What's annoying is that they blurred out, like in the video that I watched, they blurred out the first dude who just basically decides that he quit. I guess he hasn't he doesn't believe in staying in the fight.
No, so my friend Vince, that was a LAPD detective that was on scene that day. So a lot of the stuff that came out said that the other guy committed suicide, and killed himself. Vince said that it was not like, I'm done with this world, I'm punching out, bang. They were wearing heavy body armor, and by that point in the gunfight, they had both sustained like minor injuries. So the one guy had caught like a ricochet like above his eye.
Yep.
And he was firing the Beretta pistol, and my buddy Vince said that the pistol malfunctioned, and because he had gotten a wound above his eye, that he turned the gun around to look at it and tipped his head back like this, and he said either they were never sure, but they said he did not intentionally shoot himself, that the gun was so hot that a round just cooked off, or that he accidentally fired it when he tipped his head back to try to clear the malfunction. But my buddy Vince that was there said he did not intentionally shoot himself, that the gun malfunctioned, and through the process of clearing the malfunction, either a round cooked off or he accidentally fired it. And
watching the video, obviously his AK jammed. He dropped that. He grabbed his Beretta, started taking shots. The report says that he was shot in the hand, drops it with his right hand, bends down with his left hand, picks it up.
Yeah.
Again, they say that it looked like it was placed underneath his chin, and a shot was fired. Whether that happened or not,
I mean, that is what happened.
Right.
The gun that fired a bullet into his own head was in his hand. So, I mean, in the abstract terms, he did shoot himself with his gun.
Yeah.
But Vince said it was not intentional. He said he was attempting to clear a malfunction to get the gun back up.
So going back to the armor, they were not wearing ballistic helmets. So whether they didn't have them or whatnot, or whether they didn't take a headshot into account. Obviously, you're saying that they were wearing something over their legs, like they had wrapped. That it has to be soft armor, right? I mean,
so level 3A armor is soft armor. I think now they do make
level 3
hard
is
plates,
also
but
plates.
But these guys had like the law enforcement type level 3A soft armor vests that they were wearing, and then they took the vests and modified them to cover their thighs, their lower legs, and their arms. But they were one of the articles I read said that the police officers were trying to get headshots with their pistols, but they were never able to do it because these guys were so effective with laying down suppressive fire. So every time, because you think you got to get stable and you got to get steady and you got to be still to try to make a headshot at those distances. And they said that these guys were very effective, and every time they saw the cops get still and stop moving, that they would put suppressive fire on them, and so nobody was ever able to get an effective headshot for that reason.
Yeah. So. And so, going back to obviously that rifle versus pistol mindset there, this is one of those times where it rings a little bit true here, right?
Yeah.
Like obviously that's what happened. Give those police officers the rifles in their cruisers, and this fight might not have happened for 44 minutes.
Well, and this incident, the two incidents that changed law enforcement in America forever was the Miami-Dade shootout in '86, and that's when law enforcement agencies started getting away from 6-shooters and started adopting semi-automatic handguns. And the development of the 40 caliber bullet, the 40 S&W, was a direct result of that Miami-Dade shootout. And then this shootout was directly responsible for the birth of what we now know as the patrol rifle officer, or the patrol carbine, or patrol officer rifle, being kind of standard issue even at patrol level officers, not just SWAT officers, because 1 month after this shootout, the military gave like 600 surplus M16s to the LAPD.
Yeah. And obviously that's very, very interesting. Now, has something like this level happened since? When was the Miami-Dade?
The Miami-Dade shooting was '86, but that's what started getting cops off of 6-shooters, and then this was in '97, and so this is where the patrol officer carbine came from. Yeah.
We often talk about when you go into the history of bank robbery and whatnot, and how it started, and olden days, Wild West days. Obviously it was robbing banks has been a historical event in the makeup of the United States. I mean, you kind of really can't dispute that it happened, and there are famous gangsters that used to do that. You don't see it as much now. You don't hear about it. I mean, when was the last time you heard of a bank being robbed? because I think just banks are robbing us on their own. We like I just think that's part of society. Like it's you don't really see that. And you definitely don't see it to this level. But it would be even worse now. Like you're talking about the evolution of gear, right? Now you've got hard plates, you've got plate carriers, you've got all of the gear that would be on there, the rifles that are in play. Now you got the ballistic helmets that are available to the public. Night vision. Shit, this thing doesn't even happen during the day. This happens at night, and you got night vision that's being used. So it's wild, wild to see. But go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say kind of to that point. I think I've talked about this before. It's a movie that, yes, I'm well aware it is a bad movie, but we've also talked about how it's okay to like a bad movie because there's a difference between a movie that you like and a good movie. Those aren't always just because you like a movie doesn't make it a good movie. The movie SWAT with Colin Farrell is a terrible movie. But it is. I love that movie. If I'm ever flipping through the channels and that movie is on, I watch it. I like that. I like that movie. I've got a million guns, but there's only 3 guns that I have that are really quote unquote clone guns. And I have a clone of the LAPD SWAT rifles from that era. Because the ones they used in the movie were actually clone correct. The ones they used in the movie were built by actual LAPD armorer. So I have a clone rifle of the LAPD SWAT carbine from that era. But the opening sequence to the movie SWAT is basically a redo
of this movie. Of
because
this incident,
it's like they loosely base the opening scene on this incident, but the SWAT is prepared. They have rifles, they have snipers, and so it's like they kind of relive this shootout as what could have been if the officers had the weapons and training,
shooting the
special weapons and tactics that they needed to address.
Right.
So so which I think is kind of neat. It's kind of like what is it? The end of Inglourious Bastards, where it's altered history.
Yeah. Do you think that they do the roll? No roll, Hondo?
No roll. God, how do you know I didn't?
So cheesy. The only roll in John Woo movies. Just so cheesy. Oh God, I was hoping you weren't going to say that movie, but you did.
I love that movie, dude. I know, and as wrong as I'm fully aware of how wrong that is and how bad that movie is, and I love it anyway.
So. Yeah, it's so bad. What can we, looking back at that incident, and this is going to be, I'm going to pose this question, and I know we're towards the end of the show, but sometimes we kind of go over. Looking back at this incident, what did the cops do right? What did the police do right versus what did they do wrong? Because I think, and you know what? And listen, I'm going to ask that question. And for anybody that's aware of the situation, we would love to hear your thoughts about that in the comments below. What did the police do right? And what did they do wrong? And unfortunately, I think the list of what went wrong, maybe not what they did wrong, but what went wrong versus what went right is going to be a much, much longer list.
I don't think so. I don't view it that way. I think everything the police did, wrong, so to speak, it wasn't their fault. It wasn't the police's fault that they didn't have adequate weapons. It wasn't the police's fault. Like this is another thing that I actually, I still don't think it's enough. I still think it's too little too late even to this day, but I do like that more police officers are going out and getting training on their own because they recognize that the training that they're getting in the department is insufficient. And that goes with like Brazilian jiu-jitsu and combatives training and edged weapon training and shooting training. I have police officers come to my classes all the time because the classes that I'm offering is not a little bit better, is much better than what they get through their department. So the one thing that the police officers in this shootout in 1997 could have done better and arguably should have done better was like using like actual team tactics, because I mean honestly when you look at the footage, the police are not acting as a team. They're acting as a bunch of individuals that have guns. So that's the big thing I would say that they did wrong. But again, that's not their, like, they didn't have that training then, and I don't think most police officers have that training now.
Okay,
and then again, having inadequate weapons is not their fault.
Yeah, but and going back and listen, folks, I know that I'm not shitting on the LAPD in 1997 for what they did. It's easy to sit back in a studio and look at it in video and say, okay, what did they, where did it go wrong? And I think where I'm coming from with that is, like you said in the beginning, these two patrol officers watch these two individuals go in at the beginning of this.
Mm-hmm.
SWAT was 18 minutes away. They were in for 8 minutes. Now, I don't know, like at that point, whether you're doing PT or not, you see two guys roll in and immediately there are shots fired. I guess my question after the fact would be, why didn't we mobilize SWAT sooner? Why didn't we, obviously they had a whole bunch of police officers show up. Are SWAT the only guys? Is it the entire SWAT division that's doing PT 18 minutes away? Like you don't have a secondary group? Like
I heard that was the case. I heard that the SWAT, in the military, twice a year we have to do our physical fitness assessment. I heard that like the SWAT team was doing their like PT test, so all of them were at like a PT field somewhere doing a PT test.
And when we say 18 minutes away, is that 18 minutes on foot? Is it 18 minutes driving through Hollywood streets?
Bro, in Los Angeles, 18 minutes is close. Let me tell you.
Okay. And so then my next question there is, I mean, is it 18 minutes by air, helicopter? Again, these are all questions I don't know the answers to. And like I said, I'm not sitting here second guessing, or I'm asking the questions of what could have changed the outcome of that, where it didn't happen for 44 minutes. Like I said earlier in the show, nobody was killed except the two idiots that broke the law here and that did this. So it was a win.
I think the answer to your question has a direct correlation to 9/11. On 9/11, when the hijackers hijacked the planes that flew into the towers and into the Pentagon, whatever, the reason why the response was what it was to the hijackers was because up to that point, everybody that had ever hijacked an airplane wanted to fly to Cuba and wanted to hold the passengers of the airplane hostage until they free their oppressed brothers in Guatemala or whatever. Like every airplane hijacking was a hostage situation. Nobody hijacks an airplane and then flies it into a building. Nobody does that. Who would do that?
Yeah.
And I think that's also the same answer for this shootout, is that like if somebody goes into a bank, they're going to take hostages or they're going to take a bunch of the money. And then when they come out, you say, please freeze, put your hands up. And then they do it. Nobody does this. Nobody is carrying 3,000 rounds of ammunition and starts a machine gun fight with 200 cops. Nobody does that. So,
yeah. Obviously it has not been done since, right? So there was some deterrence and nobody wants to be that brazen. Most people that are going to rob something, you would think that they want to get away with it so they can keep the money. Obviously these two guys, they didn't care if they got away with it to keep the money, in my mind, because they were like, sure, you said it, they've done it twice before. They did the same thing. It was a template. They got away with it. They got 1.5 million, which I believe they said they never recovered any of that money. So it was gone within a year, which probably got them the firearms and the body armor and all that shit they bought it with. But to me, it seems like they just didn't really give a shit if they were going to keep that money at the end.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I kind of feel like, and this is just my opinion and based on their background information, I kind of think they had the stance of, if we can get away with this, cool. But if we get to shoot it out with the cops, awesome. Because also like I think another reason why this happened at kind of that sweet spot in time where, like you said, it was just before cell phones explode, not physically exploded like Hamas, but the proliferation of cell phones was right after this. So this was right before everybody had a cell phone in their pocket. And now we live in a time where everybody has a Ring doorbell. There's a video camera at every intersection. There's a video camera at every ATM. I think this happened at a sweet spot in time where you still could rob a bank, Jesse James style, and get away with it. And now it's really next to impossible.
Yeah. Now, I just want to go back to that cell phone thing, because it was 1997, and I remember where I was working, and I know I had a cell phone. I had a Motorola StarTAC, a little flip phone. But what they did not have was the capability to capture video and pictures like today's cell phone. Right. Everyone was able to make a phone call and probably say, holy shit, this is what's happening. But nobody was out there filming and videoing. But
yeah, you're right. In 1997, both of my parents had cell phones, but I did not have a cell phone until the year 2000. So
So well, folks, when I got this message about the when you shared the image or shared the social media post, I saw it, because we're time different. Sometimes you send me stuff and I'm already fast asleep. But when I woke up, I was like, oh shit, you sent me something. You're like, yeah, it was just the anniversary. And, when we were deciding what we were going to talk about today, I was like, you know what? I think we need to go there, because that sounds very interesting. And we can kind of look at it from a couple of different sides. And one of those happened to be like, a common conversation that you and I have had, where the pistol is the only thing the pistol is good for is to fight to the rifle. And, I still don't subscribe to that entire mentality, because I'm, as a civilian, what I have access to all of the time, and I say it all the time, what I have on me is what gets me to my car or gets me home. And that is a pistol. I want to make sure if that's my primary, then I'm fully trained with that. And, one of the takeaways from this is some of the training that you now see, and that you've said police officers go and they seek that training out afterwards, because they don't get a lot of it. I mean, I have a friend of mine who just became a police officer, and I don't know how much firearms training they gave her during the academy. I mean, I don't know if you're out there banging away at targets all day long to improve your proficiency and accuracy, or you have to qualify once a year. And is that enough? I mean, fortunately, this hasn't happened again, so we haven't had to revisit this. Should it happen again? Hey, man, we'll talk about it another time. But I'm sure it will not go on for as long as it has, or it did.
I like to think that if it did happen again, it would look a lot like that opening scene in SWAT, where the police would have a more adequate response and would have more, equal or superior. Well, that was their own fault, right? But but no, I mean, like, just even like to your point, and then the flip side of the coin, the North Hollywood shootout in 97 as it was, and then kind of the reliving of it in the movie SWAT. They had a sniper up on the roof, and as soon as the one guy steps out of the bank to kind of take a look around, sniper got him.
Yeah.
So, I would like to think that if that happened today, that or if this type of event happened today, it would probably play out a lot closer to the SWAT movie version. But the other thing about that, though, is like right now, I don't know about where you live, like right now here in San Diego, but like the police are having such a hard time. The response time now here for I forget what they call it, but like a category 1 type of incident, the average response time is like 27 minutes or something like that, not 8 minutes like it was in 1997. But
yeah, and this is going to be the kind of the final point here, because we talk about this all the time, right? That you are your own first responder. Nobody is coming to save you.
100%.
Does that mean you should be like the guy in Point Break at the end who, pulls up his shirt and shows Johnny Utah he had a firearm, and he says, he was off-duty police. He's like, you back me up. If you are carrying a firearm and you happen to be in this situation, do not be that person. I mean, like
No.
this is not the time where you need to be your own first responder and you're going to save yourself. Like that's not a good thing.
Being your own first responder is one thing. Taking it upon yourself to become the police is
not what you should do. So,
no, that is
as always, thank you guys for being here. I always end it with, be safe, stay prepared. And I'm going to add just be smart in situations like this. Jamie?
Nope. Training is key. These guys were trained to some extent. They were prepared to a great extent. They both sustained several wounds prior to actually being taken out of the fight, and they stayed in the fight. Even though they were bad dudes and they were crazy, there is still something to be gained from looking at it from their side. So with that, just remember, it's easy to be hard. It's hard to be smart.
All right, guys. Until next time, ZP002 out.